Hello guys, and welcome to this WhatsApp tutorial video. So in this video you're going to be learning how to build a chat application like WhatsApp or a chat application like Facebook Messenger. So they pretty much work alike like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. So this is a user that's already shown in my application, and also I'm logged in with another user. So over here I'm logged in with let me just quickly do that, sam@gmail.com. I'm going to log in. So when I log in, I get to see other users. So on my mobile phone, let's say for example, I'm going to create a chat user 2. So I'm going to create a chat user 2 and give it an email address of chat-user2@gmail.com, then give it a password. And once I register and log in, it's going to automatically emit to the back end, and we're going to see that user on our mobile application over here. So once I log in, you see we have 2 users. So I'm going to click on this user 1, and I'm going to join on this user. Also, you can also chat with another user. Maybe you are logged in with another credential, you can chat with that user. So I'm going to log in with Sam. I'm going to log out immediately and log in with sam@gmail.com. So right here on my mobile phone, I'm going to log in with chat user 1 because I want to chat with the user 1. And I'm going to log in. So once I log in and click on this user, I'm going to text a message like hi. So I'm going to say hi. And on my mobile device, I can get some message. So when I text here hi, I get the message on my mobile phone, and I can say hello from my mobile phone. And you see that message, we get it instantaneously. I can now say how are you doing. So once I text, automatically we get a message for this unique user. So we are going to be doing this with Socket.io, Nodejs, and React Native. So before you continue, make sure you hit the like button and also the subscribe button, and let's dive in. So before we continue, just go ahead and click on the description. You're going to see a link that will take you to this little boilerplate that we're going to be using. And inside the boilerplate, you're going to see 2 folders, the chat folder and also the Node API. The chat folder is the application, this React Native application, while the Node API is the back end that we're going to be communicating with. So inside here, we have the config with the default JSON file, which is your MongoDB URI. So just go ahead and put your own, because after this, I'm going to delete my own URI. And also specify your own Amazon secret, your own secret API key. So why this is Amazon secret is because of the last project we built with. I kind of take the back end in order for us to use it on this project. So I'm just going to close that. And inside here, inside this package.json, we just added a Socket.io. And for now, the Socket.io is just what we added, and I think calls as well. Then inside the chat, let's just go ahead and go through some packages that we're using. So we're using native base because you're going to be making pretty use of native base in the tutorial. We're using Redux and we're using Axios, but I don't think we're going to be making a request with Axios because Socket handles everything that we want. So all this is from the Amazon clone application that we built lastly, and we have the Socket.io client so that we can use it to emit events to the Socket.io for the Node.js application. So let's go ahead and close that as well, and let's start off from our server. So the first thing we need to do here, since we already have every other thing, is we brought in the HTTP. So sorry for that pronunciation. I'm going to bring down the socket as well, the Socket.io, which is going to require the Socket.io. Then beneath this server, we are going to initialize init our sockets. So over here, I'm just going to create a variable called IO, and it's going to take the socket IO, and we can pass in our server, then the sockets. So this will help us to use socket IO on this IP address or on the website link in case you're using a website. So when we go down to so let's scroll down over here. So above this, we are going to create a middleware. So this middleware is going to be a socket middleware. So quickly, let's come over to this middleware file or folder, and I'm going to create a file called sockets.js. So over here, I'm going to require, so I think I can just increase the font size a little bit so that it can be a bit bolder. So I can make this 20, I think is best, not bad. Or maybe make it 22, better. So that will force me to close the left pane, and I'm going to require from the middleware folder, I'm going to require the socket file, and we're going to call a function. Then the IO that we just created, we can pass that to that socket IO. So over here now is where we're going to be handling everything for the socket so that we don't affect our server or do a lot of things on our server file. So inside this file, I'm just going to use a module that expose. We're going to define, export a default that is going to accept an IO, a default function that is going to accept the socket. And then we can say IO.on connection. It's going to give us a function of a callback that's going to grab the socket for that active connected client and the back end. Then whatever we want to do here, then we can do it. So I'm just going to console.log socket connected. So the only thing remaining for us now is to make use of this socket that we created here on our application in order for us to get these sockets connected. Then we can emit functions and throw back, emit event and throw back events. So right now, let's go ahead and create a folder inside our React Native application folder. I'm going to create a component called users. So inside these users, I'm going to create a file called index.css. So some people complain to me that I should stop using TypeScript. So I'm going to use some files as TypeScript file, and I'm going to use some file as pure JavaScript files. So I'm going to create 3 more files. So the first file I'm going to create is called the user chat.js. The second one is the user header.js. The third one is the user list. The fourth one is the users file. Then, okay, we already have our index.css file. So over here, all these things, we don't have a component right now inside of them. I mean, the component functions. So I'm just going to quickly create those. I'm just going to name these user chats. So I usually like breaking this down, and I'm going to export default user chats. So I'm not going to waste time doing this. You've seen how we can do it. So I'm just going to quickly do it on other components. So inside this index.css file, I'm going to import React from React. So guys, don't forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button. I'm going to import something called the create shared element transition from React navigation shared element. So this is kind of a cool way of using create element, using elements, what do I call it again? Using shared transition element, but we are not going to use it on this video. Maybe one of my videos, I'm going to make a video on how you can use shared element. Of course, there are many cool videos of how you can also use it. And I'm going to import the user component. So I'm going to import the user components. And I'm going to import the user chat. Now let me just type down user chat, and it's going to grab that for us. I'm going to bring it down. I'm also going to bring down the user list. So automatically it brings it down for us. So I'm just going to export type of authentication that we're going to be using here. So we have the auth routes. So this user route, not auth route, because we already have the auth route. So this user route, we have the user list, set it undefined. We're going to grab that into 2, and this one is the user chat, while this one is the message. So we are going to create a folder called message and also the component. Then here we can export cons user stack. So inside this user stack, we can use that create elements stack navigator for shared element transition, and we can pass the user routes. So I'm just going to quickly come down here. So guys, I think this is a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to keep it this way. And beneath that, we are going to export the const of user navigator, which is going to be a function that's going to return a JSS, and we can bring down the user stack. So inside this user stack is going to have every other thing. So for now, before we set the initial stack, we must bring in the navigator. Navigators, yeah. So inside here we can say the user stack dot the screen of the user stack, and here we can give it a name. So automatically we get those recommendation because of this TypeScript. So I'm going to use the user list on this one, and right here we are gonna have options. So for this option, we don't want to show the header, so we are going to set the header shown to false. And lastly, we can set the component to the component of the user list. So we also have for other screens, so I'm just going to set one more screen for now, except for the message. We're not going to touch the message for now. When we are ready for that, we are going to do it. And this one is the user. Let's make sure it do exist, user chat. We also hide the header, and we set it to user chat. And let's go ahead and save it. So guys, I feel like let's complete for the message so that we are not going to be leaving things behind. So I'm just going to create a folder called messages. No, it is supposed to be inside this user called messages. So we're going to create a file called messages also. For now, let's just make it a singular message. We're also going to create a file called message container. So this one is message container.js, and also lastly we have the message header.js. So for the message container, I'm going to use a class-based component. So I'm just going to import React from React, and I'm going to create a class of message. It's going to extend react.component, which is going to, it's been long I use something like this, so I think is the render. Then inside there we're gonna have return, so we can return null for now, but let's go ahead and export default message. So, and let's save that. And for the message container, I'm going to use the normal real functional components, RONFC. I'm going to just quickly do those. So message container, break it down as well, and I'm going to also do it for this one, RONFC, called message header. I'm going to break it down, bring it down, and also finish it up. So this one is the message header, this one is the message container, and this one is the message. So the message doesn't have anything, but I'm just going to quickly, so if you can recall, we always use a style. So I'm just going to bring down the box so that I can have access to the text, and here I can just return a text with a variant of title, and here I can just say message. So if you don't know how to use Restyle, you can check also, there is a pop-up at the top right of your screen. Just click on it and you're going to learn how to use React Native Restyle. So coming back to this index.txs file that is in the users folder, we can just quickly go ahead and finish up the user stack.screen. We can, first of all, you know that we need to hide the header. We don't want to show the header, and also we need to give it a name of message. And lastly, we can specify the component to be the message component. So let's hit enter, and automatically it's going to import that for us, and I can just bring it down here. So let's go ahead and save it. And right now, let's go ahead and use the stack navigator that we have just created, because this is a user navigator, so it's more like a stack navigator. So when we come over here, we have the app. So I'm just going to specify the user and put the undefined there, and come down here, grab this and paste, and we can change this to user, and we'll change this alt navigator to user navigator. So that should solve it, and let's go ahead and save. So I'm just going to group this together because it looks more neater. So the next thing we have to do is to specify all the types of action that we're going to be dispatching with our reducer. So I'm just going to go over to the store. So come down to the store, you're going to click on actions, and we're going to quickly create a file called chat actions. But before that, let's declare the variables for our chat. So I'm just going to name these chat action types, and I'm going to export some default consts. So the first one is called all users, in order for us to have access to all the users. And I'm going to define also active room. So this active room will actually specify the active room for the current user. Maybe the user, maybe we have 100 users, so it's going to automatically specify each active room whenever the user clicks on the user he or she wants to chat. So it's called active room. We also have active user, just like active room. We also have, sorry for this, add a message. So whenever we send a message, this is going to also return that message to us. And we also have inject a message. So this is whenever the user, whenever a user sends a message to another user, the socket sends it to that user. So that user have to, the messages of the user have to update, not our own user. Of course, this add user adds the message to our own state, but for the other user, the inject message adds it to the user message. So I'm just going to quickly name it inject message. We also have response cost of load messages. I guess you should know that. And also we have clear active user. So I'm trying to put my head together for this. Sorry, clear active messages, sorry, not user. So whenever we click on a user to chat, we need to clear an active message that is going to be coming from our reducer. So this kind of helps us not to see the messages that we send to another user. So we want to automatically have an update from our messages, and it's going to group this message in a different array for us so that we can have access to a particular message for particular messages for a particular user. So I'm just going to just grab this and put here. So these are all the types that we are going to be using. So one more thing we have to do is to type down ipconfig on our CMD, and we can see our IP address. So this IP address is specific to your network provider. So this is the IP address of my network provider, and make sure that your mobile device and also your PC is connected to the same IP address, because we are using the same IP address here as our URL. So imagine that the backend is online. This is supposed to be your website URL, but since you're working over a Wi-Fi network, or maybe you have some couple of devices that you're using to connect to each other, but just make sure you are using the same IP address. So go ahead and type ipconfig, and you are going to get your own IP address, and just quickly come over here and replace it with this one, but leave the port, because this port is what you're going to be using our Node backend. And right now, let's go ahead and create an action file that we're going to be using for our chat actions. So like I said, I will not be using TypeScript because of the complaints that I got. So we are going to be defining some couple of functions that we are going to be using whenever we are interacting with our backend. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to export a function called load messages. So this is going to be loading all our messages. And the second one is chat user list, so a function. Then we have a response cost of unique user chat, which is going to be a function. And also we have a function of on unique chat. So we also have, we call this one send message, for sending a message. We also have a response costs, a constant of handle dispatch message. So let's close that for now. So all these are asynchronous function, but we are going to add those things shortly. Then we have load room messages, and the last one. So we have the load room messages, and we also have clear active messages. So if you can recall, we also define a type that is similar to this. So all these things are actually an assign function. So let's go ahead and add the dispatch and close it appropriately. I'm just going to copy from here to here. I'm just going to be pasting. So you can also do likewise. I'm just going to paste that quickly. And lastly, we are done with all the methods that we are going to be using. The next thing we have to do is to go over to the app file. So inside this app file, I'm going to dispatch a function that's going to be coming from our chat actions called handle dispatch message. So why I choose to dispatch it from here is because of how React behaves. So at some point, React kind of updates, like you can't control the update. So controlling the updates kind of limits some certain things so that it couldn't repeat multiple times. But if you allow it at some places, you see that the update is going to make you have multiple values of a single value that you just need. So that's why I choose to handle the dispatch message. So it's going to be accepting an event that we're going to be emitting from the back end, that is the message that the user sent from the other point. The next thing we have to do is to come over to these chat actions once more. And we are going to be importing something called UID from our utils file. So this utils file was created in our boilerplate. So go ahead and, okay, you already have the boilerplate, so you should have access to it, and it's called the UID. And I'm also going to import the assign storage, but for now we are not going to be using assign storage, but let it just be there. And what you have to do is to create a socket config. So we can export const socket, which is going to be IO So this IO, we are going to import it. So I'm just going to quickly import IO from socket client. And for the socket itself, we are going to be connecting that with our API URI. So don't forget to have that API URI imported from your types, and it's going to accept a parameter of false new, and we can set it to true. And what we just have to do is to connect to the back end. So we can say connect socket on connection, which is going to give us a callback. We can just console.log connected. So if you could recall, we are getting this from our middleware on the back end. So I'm just going to quickly show you that. So over here, you see that we have connection. So automatically, whenever we connect from that IP address, we connect to these sockets. So right now we are done connecting everything we wanted to connect, and we are just faced with this screen over here. I'm just going to go over to this login file. So come over to this login file, and we're going to change this the way it should be. So while this should change is because whenever we log in, we want to update to every other user that this user is actually logged in. So in case the user registers as well, we also emit an event. So I'm going to also show you how we can do that. So we're going to use something called promise. So this promise is going to accept a function with a resolve callback, and then we also have to do something here whenever we are done. So I'm just going to bring this dispatch here, but I'm just going to wrap it inside this resolve, and whenever we are done, we can emit a function. You can say socket. So make sure you have this socket imported. So once I click on OK or hit enter, it's going to automatically import that. I'm going to emit an event of get users. So we are going to handle that shortly. So whenever I hit on login, automatically it emits that for us. So we are getting an error saying cannot find module or declaration. So coming back here, we exported sockets. Please just go ahead and make sure you import the proper one, and just hit enter. It's going to grab the proper path for you. So I don't know what the actual problem was, but let's move ahead. Right now, let's go over to the auth actions. So come over to this auth actions file, and the thing we want to do is whenever a user registers as well, we want to emit to other users that a user has registered, but I think it's already okay because whenever we log in here, we already emitted a get user. So we don't even need to add it over there. But one thing we can do as well is to come over to this login action. I'm going to say if, or let's do it this way because we're going to be grabbing some user from our data. So if you're not sure of how we did this, I would like you to refer to the Amazon project, Amazon e-commerce project, so that you can see how we did the authentication. So I'm just going to click on users. Take users from the array. I can say if there's a user, then we have to dispatch this, and I think user. So why we did this is because we will not have a null value whenever we are dispatching a user. So I'm just going to save this. And one more last thing we have to do is to come over to this login file once more, and I'm just going to use the navigate at the top, and I'm going to navigate to the users. So remember that this users is coming from our authentication over here. So I think it's users, not a user. So I'm just going to change that to users and save, and everything we have is set. So why you see me automatically logged in is because of what we have over here. We said if the user is authenticated, automatically it's going to log me and bring me to the user screen, the first screen as well. So I don't think we specified an initial navigator, an initial screen. So over here we don't have an initial screen. So from the preview of our design, so I think I closed that, but let me kind of open it quickly. We have this user list, so you can see the status and also the chat. So the chat, we can just call it user list, but you can see that everything here is the users with the chat. So quickly, let's go ahead and start off by starting from the top, and then we go down to the bottom. And also we are going to work together with our socket, because I don't want to work on the design and then the logic. I want everything to be together. So right now, let's quickly go ahead and add everything that we need in this user list. I'm just going to remove this and bring in the box, and I'm going to also bring in the text and clear this totally. So this user list is going to have a box with a background color of white. So let's just give it a flex of 1. So I'm just going to save that, and you can see automatically we get a white color over there, white background color. So inside this user list, there are some couple of things you're going to accept, but before that, you're going to create a method. I'm going to create a method called onLogout. So this logout is going to be used to log out a particular user. Maybe you want to log in with another user credentials, and it's going to dispatch the function called logout. So I've not yet added that. I'm just going to create a dispatch function from the use dispatch, and I'm going to dispatch logout, and this logout is coming from the auth actions. So you see we have our actions here. So this logout is coming from the auth actions, and whenever we log out, we have to navigate. So one more thing is to bring down the navigate from use navigation. So we are using the one from React Navigation 5. So React Navigation / native. So I'm going to bring down the navigate. So we just have to navigate to auth. We navigate back to the auth screen, and that's it for that one. And inside here, we're gonna give this a position relative. So the first thing I have to do is to add, I'm going to add something. I'm going to add this over here. So you can see this little icon, something like your messages. I'm just going to add a touchable. So it's called touchable pass. I think touchable without feedback would be better, without feedback. And I'm going to make sure it comes from React Native. I don't want this one from gesture handler. Without feedback. And for the onPress, it's going to accept the onLogout, and inside there we're going to have a box with a position of absolute, and inside this box we're going to make sure it's at the bottom part, but 10 from the right and also 10 from the bottom. So this box is going to have an image with a source of bots. I'm just going to close this first. So these images are ready for you, are already there for you, so you don't even need to worry yourself on how you could get the images. So if you check at let's go ahead and click on that, you could see these images over here. So I've already compiled the images for you. So we are getting an error because we couldn't find an image. I'm just going to bring in from React Native, and let's save that again, and kind of refresh. So we should get something floating at the bottom right of our Android app when we are logged in. So you could see, and whenever we log out, we kind of log out. So I'm just going to log in with that user again, sam@gmail.com, with a user, and I'm going to hit on login. So the next thing is to add the user header. So the user header is from this design. We could see that here we have this hamburger, something like a menu icon and also a search icon. So I'm just going to quickly bring in the user header. And the user header accepts a parameter of back, I think, back, and let's set that to true. So I'm just going to save that and come over here. We can just grab that back. So for this user header, same thing that we did for the other one, I'm just going to quickly grab it. So I'm going to grab this line of code and come over here and paste that. And we have to return a box, reflex direction of row, and also a padding of medium. We can give it a height of let's quickly bring in, I think, const to dimensions, the get window. So here we can get the height, and back here we can just say we want it to take the height of 0.06, just a little bit, and we can justify the content to space between, and lastly we can align the items to the center. So because we have a back, so whenever we have a back, we want to show a back button. So I can say if we have a back, I want to bring in the back icon. So I don't actually remember where I got this from, but okay, from the icons here, and we have the size of 27. Lastly, whenever we don't have a true value, so from the icons you can say size of 20, and let's go ahead and save that, and we should get something here. We are not actually getting anything. Okay, you could see we have this back icon over there. And lastly, I can bring in the search components. So I think the search components, we have to create that, or okay, it already exists from icons search. And don't also forget to add a size of 27, and let's save that, and that error goes away. So when we log in, you get the the search icon and also the back icon. So the next thing we have to do is to add these top status over here. I'm just going to quickly do that, but first of all we have to create a folder inside this user called top search, and inside that folder we are going to create a file called top status. It's going to be a JS file. I'm going to import React from React. So before we proceed, let me just use the RNFC. I think it will be better, and break this to be top status, because I want to quickly import it at the user list. So coming back to this user list, I'm going to come over here and bring in the top status. And let's save that and go back over here. So I'm going to clear this. You know the convention is to use the box. So whenever you're importing the box, if you're using TypeScript, be careful of that dist folder. We also have to bring in the text. So like I said, I don't want to do this separately. I'm just doing everything together. So right now, let's go ahead and construct some default values that we're going to be using. So I'm going to construct top search image, and it's going to be an array. So we are going to define some couple of objects. So these objects are because we have separate images over here. So I already exported those images like I showed you. I'm going to define a source of image 1, and we can set the notification to true. So I'm just going to grab this. I think I switched. So I think this is 246. So we have the image 1, we have the image 2, so I'm just going to quickly bring them here: image 2, image 3, image 4, image 5, and also image 6. And can replace all these 4, 5, and 6. So for some, the notification is going to be false. So for the notification, we are still going to add a notification at the end of this course. I'm going to add a notification so that whenever a user texts you a message, even if your phone is connected to the internet but you are offline, but you have not opened the application, you are going to get a pop-up message at the top. So just, it depends on the response I get from you guys. I will surely do it if I get a good response. I'm going to set this to false. And right here inside this top status, we are going to now start by bringing down a box. Give it a margin top because we want it to have a little bit of spacing from the top one, and also give it a padding of medium. I'm going to bring down a text. So for this text, I'm going to give it a margin bottom of medium. Give it a font size of 25. Font family of Rubik bold. And also we give it a font weight of 600. So lastly, we can give it a color of primary, and this text is gonna be status. So let's go ahead and save that, and you can see that text over there, the status text. So the next thing now is to add these images. So these images, we're gonna be using a scroll view to actually do that. So I'm going to bring down a scroll view from React Native. So we can just replace this with React Native. We can set the horizontal to, okay, automatically it sets it to true because we want it to go on the horizontal, but we want to hide that scroll bar. We can set that to false. And inside there, we are now going to be using these objects that we constructed at the top. So I can just say top search images.map. So whenever we map, we return a JSS callback, and here we can get the notification and also the source. And inside here, lastly, we have to get the index so that it's going to have a unique key for each of these. We can wrap everything in a box and pass the key to be the index. So inside this box, first we have to justify every item to the center. We have to justify for the box itself, or let's do it. Okay, let's leave it center, but if it doesn't work properly, then we can use flex end. So I can align the items for now to the center, give it a margin right of small, a position of relative, and also we need to justify this to the center because, or let me just use flex end. If it doesn't work, I will use center. So inside there, we are going to first of all check whether we have a notification. So if we have a notification, we want to return some things, or else we just return a null. So inside here, we can bring down a box. So we have to create our own notification badge. So we already have that image. I'm just going to give it a style of position of absolute. So we already have this default absolute position. Give it a top of negative -18 and also a right of -10, and then we can bring down the image with a source. So we don't yet have an image. I'm going to bring down image from React Native. So this source is a source of stars that is going to be coming from our images. So I'm just going to save that, and let's check to see whether we're going to see anything. We don't yet see anything for now. Why? Let's go ahead and refresh, but check whether we do have an error. I don't think we do have an error, but we don't have an error, but we forgot to add the image, the big images with a source of source. So let's save. Okay, right now you can see the images, and the icon badges over there is because of these notifications. So the ones that the notifications are true, you see they have this notifications icon at the top of it. So we are done with that. So guys, the next thing is to add our user chats, and I'm going to come back to this user list, close the top status. So beneath this, we're gonna have a box. So I'm just going to close that. So I'm going to give it a margin top of small and give it a flex of 1. Give it a background color of I think the gray, yeah. And we're gonna give it a padding of medium. And inside there, we're gonna give it a text. So this text is going to have a font family of Rubik, bold, and a variant of title. So if you can recall, it's going to have a text of charts, but make sure you give it a color of primary because we want to have that greenish color. And beneath here, we are now going to use the users. So the users are going to list over here. So I'm just going to import that and save. And right now you can see the chart automatically appears. And quickly, let's go over to the users file. So this users is going to list all other users that we see in this design over here. So over here, first thing I have to do is to bring in the use dispatch. So guys, sorry for that little noise. And I'm also going to bring in the use navigation. I think I don't use it. I don't need to use that one, so I'm going to use the one from React Navigation, and I'm going to bring down navigation. So sorry guys. I'm going to also declare use state of a Boolean value. So I think I'm going to set this to false, and it's going to be called load users. I'm going to set load users. And also we have the users. So this users is going to be coming from the use selector. So we can just from use selector we can grab our state. You can say state.chat. It's going to be coming from the chat that we're going to be creating, but we've not yet created that, so I'm just going to comment it out. So for this one, okay, before this one, we have to, first of all, make use of the use effect. So the use effect, we want it to run whenever the component open, and it's going to have a set timeout. So what you can do is to set load users to true. And I want that to run every 1,200 milliseconds. So we are going to also declare some default objects that we're going to be using to list out a dummy users before we go over to emitting to our backend to grab users from our database. So I'm just going to quickly create that. So the first one is going to have an ID of 1 with a name of Sam. So I'm just going to say Samuel Anthony, and I'm going to give it a message of maybe hi. I can just quickly copy this. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I can change this to hello. I can change this to okay. I can change this to now. I'm just giving it some random text. So I'm just going to change the name, Sam Jane. I'm going to change Sam Emmanuel. I'm going to change this to Kyle and change this to Brad. I'm going to change this to William. I'm going to change this to Bot. Anyone can just put that there. And we're gonna have a box inside here. But imagine top. So we don't yet have a box. So I'm just going to make sure I bring in a box. But imagine top of large and a flex of 1. So we have to wait for the load users. Whenever it is true, we can perform some operations. Show some things, but if it is not true, we want to show a spinner. So I'm just going to bring in a spinner from native base. And I'm going to give it a color of theme / colors.primary. I'm going to save that. So whenever the component loads, it's going to automatically check whether we have users. But if you don't have users, it's going to use a spinner. So while I made it that way is because sometimes for our application to emit an event to grab the users, there's going to be a little bit of delay. So we don't want to just have that boring screen. So we are having some message here. It says unable to resolve from theme. So this is from theme. I'm going to receive that. And let's go ahead and receive that. And you will see we have no issues, but let me refresh. So in case you had an error, just make sure you import everything the way it should be. There was no tough error over there. So I'm just going to allow this to load, and you can see that little spinner that shows over there. So guys, welcome back. And one more thing we have to do is to add a time in all these things. So I'm just going to add a default time. I'm just going to grab these lines of code, and I'm just going to quickly add them here. So I just have to copy this completely, add these, and this one. So I just left it that way. Of course, we are going to be getting our users from our back end, and inside this fragment, I'm just going to say users. So we make sure that it's plural. So we can say users dot length is greater than 0. So let me just by default return null else. I just want to return a box. So let me format that properly. And inside this box, we are going to give it something, give it a flex of 1, justify the content to the center, and we are going to align the items also to the center so that everything stays at the center. And inside there, we're going to give it a text with a variant. So let me make sure that this text is coming from the box. So we do not have another text except that one. You can see with a variant of title, and I'm going to give it a color black, and also inside that we are going to say no contacts yet. So if we don't have any contacts in our database, we are gonna see no contact yet, but if we do, we are gonna list out all the contacts. So for us to list out all the contacts, we are going to be making use of the flat list. So I'm just going to bring in I'm going to import some things from React Native, and I'm going to bring in the flat lists from React Native. So here we get the flat list and we cover everything, and the first thing we have to do is to make sure that we give it a content container style, which is going to be some couple of styles, and we can give it a flex direction of column because you don't want it to go horizontally. And next we want to hide that vertical scroll indicator, set it to false. So the data is going to be the users, and also we can give it a number of columns to 1. And for the render item, it's going to render everything from our objects. So the way we can handle that is to give it a callback that's going to have some return values. But for here, for this one, we are going to use the structuring to bring in the item, and the item is going to contain the ID, the name, the message, and also the time. And one more thing I forgot to do is to add the email. Let me just quickly add an email. So I can say sam@gmail.com. I can just quickly grab everything from the email. So guys, don't forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button. So we have all those fixed, and it's going to return a JXS with a fragment. So let me just use this little fragment, and inside here we are going to give it a touchable opacity. So I want the one from React Native. So the touchable opacity is now going to have a function that we are going to create that is going to contain the user list. So I'm just going to type down user list. So we are going to create this user list within this users component. So for the user list, I'm just going to come at the top here and create a function called user list. So make sure that the user list is active, and you can see we have the user list, but it's going to accept some couple of parameters. We have the ID, the name, the message, the time, and also the email. So these are the couple of props, and what I just have to do, since we are using a spread method, I'm just going to use the structuring method to grab every other data from the user list. So one more thing is, okay, let's just go ahead and first of all list out our user, and I forgot to specify the key extractor, so we couldn't find message. Is it really message or messages? So this is message, not messages. So that's fixed, and I think we still have an issue, but let's allow that to reload. Okay, we don't have any issue right now. So whenever we okay, before we do this, say nothing was returned from the render. Nothing was returned from the render. Okay, that's because there's nothing returned from the render of the user list. So you could see the user list over there. So we don't have an issue, but what I can do here is to say whenever we press on this, we can just, let me just give it something like an alert pressed. We are still going to come back to fix that. So I'm just going to go over to that user list. So inside this function, we're going to return a box reflects direction of row, and let's save that to get rid of that error so that error disappears. And right now you can see we don't have any error. So if we're not getting any values because we are not returning anything. But for this error, the way we can fix that is we have to specify a key extractor. Let me kind of quickly check something. We can say the key extractor, we can just use the structure and get the ID. We can say id.toString. So using toString, whether it's a number, is going to automatically convert it to string. So for the user list, we start off by giving a flex direction of row. And why you see this flex direction of row is because if you check here, we have the image, we have the name, and also the last message. Then we have something like a next icon, and we can give it a margin bottom to space it out a little bit. You can also give it a background color of the gray, align the items to center, and inside here we're going to have a box, a padding vertical of small, a margin right of medium, a justified content of center, and also a position of relative. So each of these boxes is going to have a height. Okay, for this one is the image box. So the image box is going to have a height of, let me give it 52, and also a width of 52. You can align the items to the center so that we can go up here. So come up here and bring in the image, and inside here we're gonna bring down the image. So image is gonna have a source of okay, we use a default image, so I'm just going to save that to see. So you could see this big head image that we're using here. It looks really awful. So I'm just going to give it an analyze styling of style sheets dot absolute fill object, but we're gonna give it a height of 50 and also a width of 50, and we want the resize mode to contain everything. So this thing I did here, it kind of looks funny, but let's just leave it that way. It kind of looks funny the way it is, but you could see the image properly arranged itself. And when I click any of these, you see that press that we put down over here, the touchable opacity automatically shows up. So I'm just going to remove that. And coming back to the user list, let's go ahead and complete the design. So I'm just going to bring down a box. So this box is going to have a flex direction of column, and it's going to justify the content to space between. And we have a padding vertical of medium, and inside here we're going to have a text. So let me scroll up a little bit. We're going to give it a variant of title and a color of black, and also a font size of 19. We're going to give it a text transform of capitalize, and inside there we're going to have a name. So beneath that text, we're going to have another text with a message. So if you can recall, the message is coming from the top and also the name. And lastly, beneath this box, we're gonna have the right box. So for this one, it's going to have a margin left of large. We want it to be a bit far from the left. Reflects direction of column. Is going to contain the right icon and also the time. And it's going to have an align item of center. We can justify the content to space between and also give it a padding vertical of medium, a flex of 1, and a padding left of medium. And inside there, we're gonna have the image, which is that little icon. So we have the source of right, and we're gonna give it a style of margin bottom of 10, and we're gonna have that text of the time. So I'm just gonna put time. So we want the variant to be a small title, and we have to give it a font size of 12. So when we save this, we get every other thing that we want to get. So you could see the list of users over here. So this kind of looks cool right now. You can see we don't have to bother ourselves of any other thing. So we don't, at least we have something good to look at. So right now, when we click on this user, you see that nothing happens. And also it is not good that we are using a dummy users. So we want to make use of this use selector to get users. So that will now lead us to making use of our socket to actually get users. But before that, scroll down to this touchable opacity over here. So there are some couple of things that we're gonna add there. The first thing is to make sure that we are gonna navigate. First, I think it's best I dispatch a clear active messages. So we've already defined that method. So the clear active messages clears every messages in the active data from our reducer. And then after that, we just have to navigate to message. Then with all these params. So these params is the user params, the user that we want to chat with, the ID of the user, the email of the user, and also the name of the user. And I'm just going to click on that user, and you see we come over to the message screen. And what we have to do right now is to come over to the user list. So this user list right now is where we are gonna be we are gonna start making use of our socket. So what it's going to do is we're gonna use the use effect. So the use effect runs whenever the component opens, and we want to dispatch the chat user list. So I think I made a mistake now, but let me check. The chat user list here isn't what we want to import. So this is the wrong one. I'm just going to import the right one, chat user list. So make sure you do import the right one from our chat actions. So I'm just going to save. So whenever we open our application, whenever we come over to this user list component or the screen, automatically we are going to call this function called chat user list. And right now, let's go ahead and start making use of the socket to actually grab users from our back end. So guys, before you continue watching, do not forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button. And this is the continuation of our video. We actually stopped at where we said that we're gonna emit some functions, emit some events to the back end that will actually get all the users for us. And let's go ahead and do that using this chat user list. First thing I have to do here is to bring in our get state, which is going to grab our already existing state, and we can from this get state to access either the auth state or also the chat state from our reducer. So right now inside this chat user list, the first thing we have to do is to make sure we have the socket, which we have already done. So if you had followed along initially, you could see that we already have this socket, and I'm going to use that socket to emit an event called Get Users. So this event is going to emit Get Users, and let's go ahead and open our socket file. So right here you could see the socket file, and whenever we emit an event, we should get something like socket connected. So you could see already we have socket connected, even though the app is actually reloading. So you could see that again, the socket connected, because automatically it's going to bring you to the chat user list. So the first thing we have to do in this socket is to grab that event. So I'm going to call this one Get Users. So I can say socket.on. I think I didn't bring in that socket. Okay, we already have the socket here. I just forgot that we do have it here. So we could say socket.on get users, which is going to return a callback. And the way we can use this is to create something called schema. But let's kind of console.log this while we create our schema. So we can just say get users. And let's save that and refresh our application. Whenever you send on your back end, it's going to terminate already existing connections. So just go ahead and restart your application to refresh all connections. So I'm just going to go over to the schema folder. So over here, you could see the schema folder. Okay, we already have the user schema, but let's go ahead and create one more schema. This schema came from the boilerplate. I'm going to create a schema called message. It's going to be called messages.js. And inside this file, we are going to first of all bring in the mongoose, and also we are going to bring in the schema from the mongoose, so we can just refer back to the mongoose.schema. And we are going to export a module.export defaults, and we're going to call it messages, and it's going to be the mongoose model. So the model is our database, so we can say messages, and we can now pass a schema that we're going to create. So I'm just going to quickly create something called the messages schema. So I'm just going to first of all bring it down here before we proceed, and coming back here is going to be a new schema, and this schema is going to accept some couple of configs for how we want our table to structure data. So first of all, we have the room ID. So the room ID is going to be a type of string, and it's going to be required to true. We also have the sender email, a type of string as well, required to true. We also have the receiver email. So we have a type of string and also the required to true. And also we have the text message. So the text message is a type of string. We also have to set the required to true. And lastly, we have to set the time, but we are going to give it a default value, which is the date now. Okay, I can just remove required because we're not going to be passing the time. Automatically, it's going to create the time for us using the date.now, just like I mentioned earlier. So I can just pass that and format that using prettier and just save it. But I just wanted us to create this quickly. So let's proceed back to the socket, and let's check back in our console. We should see something like the get users. So you could see get users over here. So whenever we come over to this component, it's going to emit get users, and at the back end we can console that get users. So the first thing we have to do now is to grab the users and send it back to the client, which is the application. So I'm going to use the user schema. So I'm just going to quickly bring in the user. I'm going to require, I think I went too far. So it's called schema/user. And inside here, I'm going to remove that console. I can say user.find. So I don't want to find a specific thing, but I want to get all the users with mongoose. You can just put an empty object, and it's going to give us an error, which is the callback and the users. And we are just going to emit to all the user connected with a let's say something like a key of get all users, and we can pass that users that we got. So coming back to this client, while we refresh our application, we can just quickly come over to this client. What I just have to do is to grab all the users that we got from our backend. So I can just simply say again that socket.on. So I can say, let me just comment that quickly, emit get users, get all users. So I can say socket.on get all users. We could grab that users, and let's kind of console.log all users to see whether this actually works perfectly. So, and let's refresh and save that properly. And quickly you could see all the users that we got back from our back end, and listing them out is exactly the same listing in our users from our compass over here. So you could see we have like 3 users, Sam, Chi1 and Chi2 at gmail.com. So you could see over here we have Sam, we also have the Chi2, and the second one is the CH1. So this is kind of so big. I'm just going to reduce that a little bit, or at least you could see that we could see, okay, look at it over here. So you could see we have the 3 users, and let's proceed. So we are done getting the users, but there is something that we need to do whenever our application opens. It's called generating a unique chat and making sure whether we have some unique chats in our let's say in our signed storage. So what I actually mean is that whenever our application opens, we want to check whether we do have an already existing chat, because we don't want a duplicate chat on a single mobile. So what I can do is to quickly create a value called unique chat, and it's going to be a JSON.pass, and what we are going to pass is to get the values from the assigned storage, and we want to get an item called at unique chat. So this is specific to each user unique chat. So if you come over to this compass, you could see we have a single chat. So this single chat is going to be stored on your mobile, and it's going to be using these details to actually check whether you already have existing chats, so that it doesn't go ahead to create multiple chats, just like the way we are going to be controlling data flows on the back end as well. And the next one is also we have to check whether we have some couple of rooms. So make sure this is camel case. I'm going to create a unique room. So this is going to be an array of rooms. So let me just go ahead and use the same technique that we use at the top. Assign storage.get item. So this one is called at unique room chat. So we have to check whether we already have some room chat or some unique chat in, sorry guys for that, in the array of chats. So we could say if there is no unique room chat, we have to create one. So the way we can create one is to use the assign storage.set item, and I guess we have to set the key, which is the unique chat, and also we have to stringify that value, because we are passing the values from over here at the top, and we just put in an empty array. And the same thing we did for that one, we do it for the second one, which is the unique room chat, and over here you just have to change this to room chats. So I think I usually forget to spell this properly, so make sure that the key you are using here is the same key that you are using here. So I think I said something wrongly, but these are called keys with the values. And let's go ahead and save that. So it's going to check whether we do have all these things, but if we don't have this, it's going to set an empty array. Then later when we want to create a chat, it's going to populate this array and still store it back to our local storage, and It's going to check also whether we have a unique room chat already existing. If we have any already existing, then we make use of that room ID to actually start chatting with that user. So right now, let's go ahead and replace these users that we created here, these dummy users that we created in the users component. So these are dummy users over here. We want to replace it from the users that we got from our back end. And the way we can do that is back in this socket, in this chat action, we are going to be dispatching this to our reducer. So let's quickly go back and create a chat reducer from our reducer. So I'm just going to create something called chat reducer. I'm just going to use JS. And let's quickly create everything that we need from this chat reducer. So we have the initial state. So I think I'm spelling something wrong here, which is just going to be an object. And inside there, we are going to have an active user. So the active user happens to be the current user that is actually using the application. And we are going to export default function, which is going to accept the state of the initial state. Then here we have the type and the payload. And it's going to accept the switch statement, which is going to be switching with the type. And we are going to have the default, which is going to just return the state. So this is a way you can use the reducer to do whatever you want to do. So the first thing we have to do is to dispatch something called active user. Whenever the user comes into this user list as well, we have to dispatch the active user and store that value in our reducer active user. So quickly at the top of here, I'm just going to set active user. And it's just going to dispatch a type of active user with this payload, with the payload of user.email. So this user.email seems to be confusing, right? But look at the way we can solve that. It's just very simple. You just have to get some things from the get state. So sorry for that. .auth, and the auth returns a user. And then we can have access to the user, the current user email. So let's go ahead and save that and come over to our reducer. Then we can say the case of active user. We just want to return everything in the state, but we want to replace the active user with the payload because it's just the user email address that we are using. And let's go ahead and refresh that so that it can properly start joining together. So I'm just going to reduce this again. And whenever we dispatch, if I just console.log the payload, is going to show you the user email address that is actually logged in. So let's try that again. So we couldn't see it because we have not yet connected this reducer to our reducer index file. So I'm just going to name these charts and I'm just going to bring in the chart reducer, and automatically everything should save that. And whenever we save a reducer, automatically the app is going to refresh, and hopefully we should see the user email when the application launches perfectly. And let's give that some seconds and check. And right now you could see automatically it dispatches the active user logged in to the active user, and we saw that inside our reducer. And let's go ahead and go back to this chat action. So the next thing we have to do now is to store these users into the chat reducer. I'm just going to create an array of users. So I'm just going to create an array of users. So this one is going to be dispatching something called all users. So I'm just going to quickly come back to this chat action. So whenever we return the user, I just have to create a const called all users, and we are going to use the users.filter. So I want to return every user except for the current user that is currently using the application on his mobile device. So that's very simple. I can just filter out the email. I can just say the email is not equals to the user.email. So if the email happen not to be the user email, we return that user, but we have to map this. So I think I will just break this down. So we are going to map this. So why we are mapping this is because we want to add something like the time and the message. So whenever we return users, you kind of observe that from this users component, I'm just going to close user list. From this user component, we only have the name and the ID. So we are going to actually return the name and the ID, but what about the message, the time and the email? Because we don't want a crash, so we are going to just quickly construct that on our own. So we can just say email, name and ID. We just grab that from the user, and we can now construct a new object with the email, first with the ID, the name, and we can just add a dummy time. I can just say 100 and also a message of last message. So let me just paste that out so that it looks neat. So of course there's a way we can do this in order to grab last message from our messages that is going to be loading from the socket as well, but maybe we can talk about that later. Then when we are done with getting all the users, let's kind of console.log this to actually see what we have. So we can say all users. I'm just going to change this to Prulo. And let's save. We should get all the users. So sorry for this little delay, but it worth it. And we should see all the users with a constructed time and also the message. So you can see we have the ch1 at gmail.com, and also we have the ch2, but we are not actually getting the current user that we used to log in. That is the user called sam at gmail.com. So right now, let's go ahead and dispatch that to our reducer. I can say type of all users, and I'm going to set the payload to all users. So forgive me for that error, I'm trying to be fast. Right now, let's go over to the reducer. And inside this reducer, we're gonna create a case of all users, which is going to return an object. We spread all the states, and we are gonna replace the users with the array of the payload. So, and let's save that, and automatically it's going to replace everything from our socket to everything on our reducer with the data from the socket IO. And quickly, let's go and replace all these users over here with the users that we got from our socket. And I'm going to come over to this users component. So right now, I can just go ahead and comment this out. And at the top here, we can now uncomment that, and we can get the users. So we are getting it from the chat, and let's save. And when we save, the users that we get back should be the users from our reducer. So it's saying we don't have a use selector, which is very simple. We can get the use selector from React Redux. So I'm just going to import from React Redux. I can get the use selector, and let's save that, and that should solve that. So if we have another error, we can quickly fix that. So right now, you can see we have the chat user 1 and the chat user 2. So we are done getting all the users, so we don't have to bother ourselves getting the users, and everything looks very simple. So the next thing now is to create a chat. When we click on a single user, which is going to store the chat that we created on our Mongoose database, and then we can use the chat ID to automatically create a chat and chat with that user. So before we create a chat, there are some couple of parameters that we're going to be getting from the messages component. Let's go over to this messages component. I'm going to close that. I'm going to leave other one except for that index file. I can just close this and open the messages component. So we don't even have a good design, but don't worry, we are still going to fix that because we are going to work on it directly. So you can only get this text called message. So quickly at the top here, whenever our component opens, we're going to grab some couple of things that we pass from our props. So I'm just going to refer to the props and grab it using the super props. This is more like object-oriented method. So if I console.log props, I think we should get back some couple of data. So let's kind of check, and you can see we have some couple of data. We have something from the params, from the route params. We have the ID, the email of the user that we want to chat with. So let me kind of go back and click on chat user 2. So maximizing this makes it a little bit fast, but you can see we have the chat user 2 and also we have the chat user 2 email address. So I'm just going to close that and focus on our application. So the first thing I have to do is to create some couple of states, which is going to be an object of, we have the text message. I think we're gonna need something like active room found. So we have active room found, and let's set that to a Boolean value false. And also we have the active room, but I don't think we're gonna make use of it, but let's leave it for the sake of the application we're working on. But we're gonna have something called my messages. I don't think whether we're gonna make use of these two values, but let's just leave it in case we're gonna make use of it. So we're gonna grab some values and assign it to something called route params. So that params that we got from our object here is way too fast, so we want to simplify this to route params, and we can refer to the props.route.params so that we can have access to that params with just this .route params. And the next thing we have to do right now is to use that user to create a chat. So I'm just going to say when the component did mount. So if component did mount, we have to grab some couple of things from these .route params. And then the things we have to grab is the ID, the email address, and I think the name of the user, but I don't think whether it will be necessary, but let's just bring it for simplicity's sake, and let's kind of console.log ID, email, and name, and let's save. And you can see we have the ID, email, and name. And if I go back to this and click on chat user 1 and maximize that, you see we have the email address, the name of the user, and also the ID. So we are gonna dispatch a function called unique user chats. So I think we have already created a unique user chat over here. So I'm just going to dispatch a promise. So I call it dispatch, but sometimes we can say make use of a promise with a resolve. So why we are using a promise is because React Native has this ability sometimes to have a little kind of delay because of the JavaScript thread, but I don't want this to be an issue. So let me not rush things over here, but let me just complete this before I proceed. So what I want to do here is to use something like a timeout and make a resolve. So I'm going to resolve this after 2 seconds before we call any other function that we want to call, something like loading user messages if there is any user messages existing. So the way we can use React Redux over here is very simple. All you just have to do is to wrap everything here with a function called connect. It's a higher order function, and we are going to create a constant of map state to props. So this map state to props is going to take our state from our reducer, and we want to only access the state.chat so that we can have access to our reducer props, and I can pass the map state to props, and any function I want to also dispatch, I can pass it over here. So we are going to be dispatching the unique. I don't think it's going to work this way, but let me just quickly import that. So I'm just going to say unique user chat, and it's going to import that from the chat actions. I can just bring it down a little bit. I can say actions, and at the bottom here we can pass that unique user chat. And when we pass that, we want to, like I said, we are going to create a unique chat for each user. So before the resolve, we want to first of all create a chat. So I can just say this .props.unique user chat, and it's going to accept some couple of parameters, which is the ID, the email address, and also the name. So that's what we are going to be using to create a chat. And whenever we are done, we are also going to load messages. So I think let's load messages in case we have any messages. So I can just quickly call a function called this.props.load the active room messages. But let's go ahead and comment this out because we are still going to come back to it. All right, so let's go over to the unique user chat. So inside this unique user chat, we have to bring in the get state as well. So I'm just going to bring in the get state. And inside here, we have to get the user email like we did at the top. And we get the user email. So, but I'm just going to map this to sender email. So this email is still the active current user email address. So the first thing I have to do is to check whether we already have an existing chat. So an existing chat is the array of chats that we created here using the unique chats that we injected into our local storage using the assigned storage. So over here, I'm just going to grab the unique chat, and I'm going to pass that value. Of course, it's going to return an empty array. So we can say assign storage dot get item of at unique chat. So remember that this is caps, and let me just go ahead and console this to see what we have. And I think we should get an empty array. So we are getting an issue. Object is not a constructor, and I think we have get state.auth. Let me kind of console.log this out to see whether that was the issue. And as I suspected, so that was the issue. So I did this in the wrong way, but we can just quickly come at the top here. The user with the user. Okay, guys, let's do it this way so that we don't trouble the user at the top. We have the user and we can get the email address of that user, right? So I can let me just kind of console.log the user to see whether the user is actually available. So I'm going to click on generate chats, and we are still getting an error. So what's the problem? And let's go ahead and check our console. And you can see we have an already existing chat, and the chat is ch1@gmail.com with this receiver ID. And I think this is okay. We have the receiver ID and also the receiver name, which is chat user 1. But you can see we have something common. We should have something like a room ID. Okay, we've not yet reached that, but at least you could see we have a chat. So guys, this kind of wants to confuse me, but okay, we are still doing the right thing, so never mind. So we have the receiver ID, which is the ID of the user that we are chatting with, and then we have the receiver email, the user that we are going to be chatting with, which is chat user 1, the receiver name. So we checked whether we have an existing chat on our mobile local storage, and the next thing we have to do is to check if the unique chat.length is greater than 0. Else we have to perform some other operation. So whenever it is existing, there are some couple of things we have to do, or else we do some other things. So the thing we have to do whenever it is greater than 0, okay, let's do it this way. I want to get rid of the user, I mean the chat, so I can just get rid of the unique chat. So let me kind of save this and save it again, because I want to see something like an error message here. And let's go ahead and remove that and save. So whenever this refreshes, we should get just an empty array. So let's just allow that to finish. So guys, I'm having a little bit of code, so that's why I'm speaking somehow, so bear with me. I'm going to click on user 1 and we still get that error which we don't want. I'm going to refresh. So you could see that empty array showing us that we don't yet have an active room, even though we have an array of active rooms. I mean a unique chat or an active chat. So we have an array of unique chats. So the next thing we have to do is to make some operation in case the mobile device does not have an active chat with that current user. So let's not forget to bring in the email, and we can just map that to, I think we map it to the sender email. And inside this else, we have to declare, we have to use the assign storage.set item, and I'm going to set it to the unique chat. So I think unique chat to JSON.stringify, and we are going to create a chat, but that chat we are going to be pushing it into the unique chat. So let's still pass the unique chat. So we are not going to be passing an empty array. I'm going to create something called a unique chat data. So I'm going to create something called the unique chat data. So let's quickly go ahead and create this unique chat data. So the unique chat data is going to automatically be created. So it's called the unique chat data, and it's going to contain the sender email, the receiver email, just like the way the other one was, which is the current email address of that user. And I think there is something that we didn't actually get from this. So this is going to be getting the ID, the email address, and the name of that user. So for the unique chat data, it's going to still have the receiver name. So let's change this to name, which is the name of the user. And let's push that to our unique chat data and stringify that again and store it into our values. And right now, let's go ahead and console.log when it is greater than 0. So we can console.log unique chat data. And I think we should get, yes, so we get this active user chat on our array of unique chats. So whenever it is greater than 0, the first thing we have to do is to filter the receiver email. So the receiver email is going to be our own email. I think, no, the receiver email is going to be the user that is going to be receiving it, receiving the message, while we are going to be the sender, because this app over here, I'm the sender, while the user I'm chatting with is the receiver. So the way I can do that is to get that user. I can say unique chat data dot filter. So this one I'm going to filter the receiver email. I can say the receiver email is equals to the email address. So we have to check whether that user already exists in our unique chat as well. So let's kind of console.log that user, and you can see we get another user. The sender email is my email, while the receiver email is the chat user 1. So I can just also check if the user dot length is greater than 0. So if it is greater than 0, we just have to say the receiver email. We can grab that from the user, But in case it is not greater than 0, in case we don't have that active user, we have to I think so, guys, sorry for this little delay, but okay, whenever we have this, yes, whenever we have this user in our unique chat, we now have to create a chat. Else we also have to create a chat, but even if the user doesn't exist, we also have to create a chat. So I'm going to get some couple of things again. We're going to get the receiver ID. So it's called the receiver ID, the receiver name from the user, and we are going to dispatch a function called onUniqueChat so that we can actually use that to so we have the sender email, not okay, we have the sender email, which is my email, the receiver email, and also the receiver ID and the receiver name. So we're going to use this to create a unique chat. We also have to do the same thing for others. So for this one, whenever it is not greater than 0, we also have to create a chat. So I'm going to dispatch onUniqueChat, and I'm going to spread all the values we got from the unique chat data and pass the sender email for my email, and we can also push these unique chat data and also store it in our assigned storage. So I'm just going to grab this and save that immediately. So let's kind of have a walkthrough of what we did here. So whenever we click on a user and opens the user, we are going to check, we are going to grab the unique chat from our local storage, and we're going to check whether we have that user. Sorry, we are going to check whether we have already existing chats. Then we are going to check whether the user we want to chat with, the email of the user, does exist in that unique chat. Then if it does exist, we get back the user. So if the user is greater than 1, we are going to generate a chat. If the user is still less than 1, we are going to generate a chat. But because the user doesn't exist in our previous unique chat, we have to push back the user and store the user. But in the first place, even if the user doesn't exist, same thing that we did here, we did it here. And also we have to also generate a chat. So do not forget to also generate a chat. So these are two main types, but there's also a way to simplify this, but I think this way I did it is more simplistic and more better. So right now, let's go ahead when we generate a unique chat. So on unique chat over here, we have to use the sender email, the receiver email, and also the receiver ID of that user. And let's break this down, but do not forget to bring in your get state in case you're gonna make use of it. So let's just bring it in, and let's kind of console.log the sender email. So when we console.log that sender email, we should get that user email. So this user already exists in our chat. I mean, this is not supposed to be email. Of course, the sender email is my email, but let me use the receiver email. And you can see we have that receiver email. So CH1 is already in our unique chats. I'm going to come back and click on CH2. And you can see automatically it's going to generate a chat. And what is going on here, it is this one over here. This one over here is running. So at the first instance, if we don't have any user, it's going to use this. But if we have a user, but the user still doesn't exist, it's going to use it. It's going to use this one. So right now, let's go ahead and start generating a chat. So let's go ahead and start generating a chat. So I'm just going to emit start unique chats. So this start unique chat is going to return a callback of the receiver email. Sorry, it's going to have a parameter of the receiver email, the sender email, and also the receiver ID. So these are everything that we just need to generate a room. And with that room, we are going to start chatting with the user automatically without stress. And we are going to have a callback. So this callback, maybe you have an error, you want to handle an error in case the room creating did not went through. You can just dispatch the error and display the error. But we are not going to be handling error because everything is going to be working the way it looks at the demo for the demo. And let's go ahead and catch this event at our backend. But before that, there's something we have to quickly bring in called the unique room chat. So this unique room chat, if you can recall, is just an empty array that we created at the top, which is going to be an await of assign storage.get item of at unique room chat. So I didn't even want this tutorial to pass 2 hours, but you see a lot of things are already involved. But let's go ahead and conclude everything before we get stopped. So for this one, we want to check whether that room ID already exists in our local storage. If it doesn't exist, we generate a new ID, push it back, but still use that room ID to link up the multiple users to make use of that room ID to chat to themselves, so that whenever the user comes back, the user can be able to still use that same room ID. Even if the room ID is going to be stored in our database, we are still going to be making use of it as in again and again and again and again. And I'm going to go back to the socket, and let's go ahead and catch start unique chat. And we're going to come down here and say socket.on start unique chat. It's going to have all those parameters that we passed. So we have the receiver email. We also have the sender email. We also have the receiver ID. And we're gonna have a callback. So if you can recall, we have that callback over there, but we're not gonna make use of it. And it just this callback happens to be inside here, while this is at the back. And inside this callback function, we're gonna create a helper class or a helper file called a helper function called add user. So sorry for that, guys. So it's going to accept all the parameters that we receive from our client and the receiver ID, because we are going to be using this to now generate an ID for this user and the other user. And let's go ahead and save that and quickly create that function. So I'm just going to go over to a folder called helpers. I'm going to create a file called minx.js, and I'm going to create a function called add user. And lastly, come over here and bring in the add user. And at the top there, you could see that add user. One more thing we have to do is to import something called okay, I don't think we need it over here. We just need it, I guess, in the add user. So I'm just going to start by, the first thing we have to do is to grab those data. We have the receiver email, the sender email, and I think that's the only thing that we need for this one. And one thing that I forgot to do is to pass the socket, because we don't want to have multiple sockets. I want to use that same socket. So over here, I'm going to pass the socket that we're making use of, so that I can be able to grab it at the add user. And first of all, let's kind of console.log everything. So I'm going to use the CLG receiver email and also the sender email. So let me kind of refresh this, and let's check in our API to see whether we get those values. So that's done. It's going to bring us to the user list. Grab the users. I'm going to click on chat user 1, and you can see the only interaction that we have here is the receiver email and also the sender email. And let's go ahead and use that to create a unique chat. So each of these unique chats is going to be stored in our database. We don't want it to only be stored in our mobile device. So keeping it in the database kind of make things look more unique, and you can use it to persist your data so that you don't get to lose data. Maybe you are working on a big project like a website or a big chat application that's going to have more functionalities. You don't want to just lose users because they misplaced the application. You just want it in such a way that whenever the user comes back and registers and do everything, the user can still have access to the chat and still be able to interact with a user. So the chat is exactly what you see over here. So this is an example of a chat that was created, and let's go ahead and create a schema for that chat. I'm going to go over to the schema folder and create a file called chats.js, and like before we have to bring in the mongoose, which is going to require the mongoose, and also create the schema, mongoose.schema, and I'm going to create a schema, a chats schema, which is going to be a new schema. But first, let me just go ahead and export this module. So I can say module.export. I can just give it a name called chats. So make sure you make this look proper. I can just say mongoose.model called chats. So this is the name is going to be using for our database while we pass the chats. So inside the schema, so checking back here, we have the receiver email, the sender email, the room ID, and also the time. So I'm not going to waste time typing everything. So let me just quickly do it. So we have the time, the receiver email, the sender email, and also the room ID. So, and all these things have, they're required to be set to true. So I'm just going to quickly close that, and coming back at our mix file. So we need to check whether these users do exist, like these parameters do exist. So I'm just going to say if receiver email, if it's not receiver email or we don't have a sender email, we just want to return an object of error, then you could say users are required. So if we don't have those credentials, we just have to send that message. But in case we do, we have to create a user with just the receiver email and also the sender email. So that's what we just have to do. And the next thing is we now have to check out from the database whether these do exist in the database so that we don't have to store multiple chats in our database. So I'm just going to say the chats. I think I just have to import that. So I'm gonna save these, come over to the schema. We have the chats. So we have module to the spot chats. So you can say chats over here to bring in the chats. I can also bring in the messages because you're gonna be using it, but let me just also bring in something called the UUID. Can bring in the version 4 and map it to UUID v4. So we can say chats.aggregate. So this is how you can use Mongoose to check for a particular value and also reverse and check. We can say it's going to be an array of $match, and we are going to pass the receiver email and also the sender email. So if we have these values, we are going to automatically stop. So what you just have to do is to use the then. So we can say the chats, and let's kind of console.log that chat to see whether we have this ID already existing. So quickly refresh our client app and come over here and just wait for it. So guys, don't forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button. And I'm going to click to open a chat. So you can see we already have that chat, the ID. So okay, we already have a chat with the receiver email and also the sender email. That's why we are able to get this value. So because if you check in our compass, you could see we have a receiver email of ch1, and that's exactly what you see here. So we already have that chat, but what if we don't have that chat? We also have to check for that condition if we don't have that chat. So what you just have to do is to say if the chat dot length is greater than 0. First of all, let's go ahead and emit an event called open chat, and we can pass that value, the object value. But in a case that it doesn't exist, we can also check the reverse. We can say chats.aggregate. So you can remember we use $match. So the first thing now is the receiver email, right? So let's kind of put this down, but we're gonna map that to the sender email. Then we can now say the sender email equals to the receiver email. So in case we also have the reverse, we can then get the last attempt. So this last attempt, we are gonna use it to also check whether whether there is a chat that do exist in the reverse. So if we do have that, so I can say if the last attempt length is greater than 0, then we have to also emit an open chat of last attempt, and we can just check whether it doesn't exist as well. So if it doesn't exist, we now have to create a chat. So let me kind of console.log does not exist, and we can just let's kind of check the sender email and also the receiver email address, and let's refresh our client and check on chat user 2. So chat user 2 chat doesn't exist right now, so we should actually get that error message, that console.log message. I'm going to click on chat user 2, and you can see we don't have that chat already existing, but when we click on chat user 1, we are not going to get that message. So you can see chat user 1 do exist, and automatically it has actually opened the chat. So going back to chat user 1 and coming back here, we can now create a new chat. And first thing is to spread the user, and we can set the room ID to a new UUID value, and we can now say first we need to emit an open chat again with this new chat. So and then we have to store, so let me say store the new chat. So sorry guys for that. So it's gonna be a new chat, then we store that new chat, and then we save. And let's go ahead and save that and go back, refresh our application. So right now you can see we have only a single chat, and I'm going to click on the second user to generate a new chat. So click on this user and we generated a new chat, and checking back we should see a new chat with a sender email of this same email address and also a receiver email of ch2@gmail.com. So guys, we have already done this one. So in the next part we are going to complete everything. So let's just take a little short break and then we continue. So guys, in the last part, we are able to at least create a chat. And right now we can open a chat with just a user, and also, the sender user, the receiver user, and then a unique room ID for that active chat. So, and we emitted an open chat, and we can go back to the chat action and start using that open chat. And over here, I can just say socket.on, and we can name it open. We can grab the open chat, and whenever we open chat, there are some couple of data. We have the receiver email, the sender email, and the room ID that we are emitting back. And let's kind of go ahead and console.log that room ID. So I'm going to save this and refresh our application. So let's allow this, and we should get that room ID instantaneously. So I can just go ahead and click on a chat, and you can see we get that room ID. So this room ID is coming from our Mongoose database. So let's go ahead and make use of this room ID to create a chat. So I'm going to create a mobile room. So the mobile room is going to have the receiver email, the sender email, and also the room ID. Then first of all, we need to check whether this does exist in this our unique room chat. So we can just say if mobile room exists. So I can just say mobile room exists. I can just bring down the unique room chat.filter. So the convention is to check the room ID, and we can just give it something like mroom ID so that the name doesn't clash with the other one. Then it's gonna have this callback of mroom ID is equals to the room ID that we are getting from open chats. So we can check whether this does exist already. So let's kind of console.log mobile room exists. It's just gonna be an empty array. So I think right now it doesn't exist, so we don't need to bother ourselves, but let's go ahead and still check. I'm going to open my emulator, and I'll go back and let's give it a try. So you see we get an empty array. So since we have an empty array, we need to store this mobile room array inside our mobile device. So the way we can do that is to say if the mobile room exists, length is greater than 0, else we have to bring the unique room chat.push the mobile room that we created. Then we're gonna store that in our static storage, and we can set it to the unique room, unique room chat, and we can stringify that value, and we can pass that unique room chat that we push that value into. So guys, sorry for that little noise. So, but in case if it do exist, we are gonna emit a function called socket.emit join the two users, and what's gonna use the room ID to join the user. Sorry for that. And we are gonna bring down the room ID in case everything went perfectly. So the same thing that we did on this one is the same thing that we are gonna do on this one, and then we can dispatch that room ID. So we're gonna dispatch a type of active room with a payload of the room ID. So we join the two users, then we use these values to actually dispatch it to our reducer in order to have access to this active room, because this active room is what we are going to be using to filter the messages that is going to display for each user whenever we click on each user, so that we don't have to have all our messages shown when we only need the messages for each user joined in each unique room. So that makes it look very simple. So let's go ahead and handle for the join two users. And there is nothing much there except that in this socket, whenever we are done starting a unique chat minute here, we can just say socket.on join to users. We just want to grab the room ID. So remember that we do have a callback, so I'm just going to specify a CB. And here, I think I usually forget this. So here we're going to have a callback of the room ID, but first we have to say socket.join the users with the room ID. So this is how we can join the two users to actually use that active room IDs to chat together. And let's go ahead and save. And right now, whenever I click on any user, even though we can't actively chat, but they are already joined together. So let's go back to these chat actions. I'm going to click on a user. So if we do have an error, we are going to get an error message, but I don't think we do. So automatically we are joined. So this user is joined with the user. So even if on my mobile phone, I have to log into the application and click on this sam@gmail.com, it's going to also join me to that same room ID, and I can now communicate with these two devices. So let's go ahead and make this look more interesting by first of all changing design. Then we can load the messages, and from there we can handle the send and also receive message. And let's quickly go over to our messages component, our message component. So at the top here, I'm going to create something called the scroll view because we're going to be using the React Native scroll view. So I'm going to create the scroll view, and I'm going to say react.createRef. And at the top here, I'm going to import some couple of things from React Native. Sorry guys for that. From React Native, and that is the scroll view. We also have to import from native base because we're going to be using some things from native base as well. And coming down here, so beneath this constructor, we are going to create some methods. The first one is onChange. OnChange is whenever we are typing a text to send, it's going to accept a text. It's going to have a callback of this.setState. So we have the text message to the text that we are typing. The second one is called the onSend, whenever we send a message. And let's leave that for now. And then let's go over to the design aspect of this. So over here, I'm just going to grab the user email that we just opened. So this is coming from the this.route params. So if you can recall how we did that. And I'm going to remove this and return a container from native base. So native base kind of make things look very simple, although there are best ways you can actually use React Native to build a very nice interface for a chat application that can avoid the keyboard and also update frequently whenever a new item is added to the reducer. So for the styles, I'm not going to waste time typing down all the styles. I'm just going to grab the styles and put it. So let me just go ahead and do that. So right now I've done it, but do make sure that you bring the theme from the theme file from our style. And right now let's go ahead and start making use of the styles. So this one is going to have a styles.container. So I think I did the wrong thing. The styles.container still didn't work. Okay, let's use it directly. A styles.container. So let me kind of check something, guys. So we have the container. Why it's not highlighting properly? Well, hopefully we don't have any errors. So we are gonna have the header. So this header, I think we didn't create it. The header is gonna come from either the native base. So let me kind of check something, guys. Yeah, we have the header from the native base, and we're gonna have a styles.header. I think chat room header, and inside there we're gonna bring in the message header. So we've already created that, and let's kind of view. There is nothing here, so let's go ahead and quickly run the design. So guys, I kind of have a change of mind since most of us now know how we can actually build a very nice design. I'm just gonna copy and paste the header and show us how we can actually link the user to the link the name of the user to show on the header. So let me just go ahead and do that. So inside here we are gonna grab so inside this we are gonna pass the email address that we got from our params, and we're gonna go over to that header. So we're gonna have a box. I think, okay, we don't actually need a flex, but we need a padding horizontal of medium, a padding vertical of medium, and also a flex direction of row. We still have some other things to add to it, but let me just break it down. Then we can align all the items to the center, give it a background color of white. Then inside here we have the back icon with a size of 24, so I didn't spell this correctly. And we have the box with a style margin left of 32, a position of relative. Then inside this you're gonna have the image. So the image is the avatar itself. So this image is coming from React Native in case. Then we are gonna pass the user icon. So let's go ahead and save this. And I think you should see the big head guy. I think we have an error. So the error, it's referring to the wrong variable that we used. So hopefully we should see the big head guy. I'm just going to click on it, and you can see this big head guy over there. And we can go ahead and style that. So we have a height of 33 and also a width of 33. And lastly, we are going to give it a resize mode of contain. We're also going to have another image. Let me kind of check something, guys. We're going to have another image, but this one we're going to align it. This one we're going to have the something like an oval image. So let me just quickly just add that so we don't go ahead to waste time. We're going to add a source of oval, a style, position of absolute, a bottom of 0, right of 2, height of 7, and also a width of 7. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, that's that little green icon over there. So I kind of even forgot the icon I used. Then after this box, we are gonna have another box. So we do have another box with a margin left of large, so that there's gonna be a bit space, and it's going to contain name, and also we have the last minute scene of that user, and then we have something like a video, and also a call icon. So you could see the video icon and also this call icon, and then we have this nice looking interface. So we are done with the header. Let's go ahead and add the footer. I'm going to go over to this. I'm going to bring in the footer. So this footer is coming from the native base, and it's going to have a styles dot, I think we have footer, yeah. And let's save. And inside this footer is going to contain the text inputs and also the send icon that is at the right. So you could see we have a flex direction of row. We give it a height of 54, and then we give it an align every item to the center, but we give it a padding horizontal of 4, a width of 90% of the screen width, a border radius of 16, although this is invisible, except for the border radius that we gave to these styles.inputs. So the styles we have over here are these styles. We have the container, the chat room header, the footer, the input, and also for the input we used a font family. That's why you can see this nice looking font over here. So for the method, I think we have already created that, and we can just go ahead and use that. So whenever we want to send a message, we get the message from the state. If there is no message, we stop, but we are going to get the email of the user we want to message to, and we are going to use that. And for the unchanged, like before, we map everything from the text and set the state message to the text. The next thing now is to load our messages. So our messages is going to be the messages that the sender email is my email, and also the register email, the receiver email is my email. I mean the email of the active user that is currently using the application. So let's go ahead and use load messages. So over here, first thing we have to do is to grab the active user email. So we're gonna grab the user and the email, and we're gonna set it to my email from the get state .auth. Then we use the emitter. We're gonna emit 2 events. The first one is going to be called as in my sent messages. So I'm going to say sent messages, and the second one is going to be called received messages. So this sent messages is going to be sending my email, and it's going to be having a callback which is going to be returning from our backend whenever the whenever the emitter is successful. Same thing that we did for this one. I'm just going to grab these lines of code and also add it for this one. So let's go ahead and come over to the socket, and I'm going to bring down a method called load messages, and I'm going to pass down the socket. So this load messages is coming from the mix. So I already created them, and we are going to be using that to grab all the messages that I sent as a user, and also all the messages I received as a user, so that we don't receive, as in we don't grab other people's message or other users' messages. At this point right now, whenever we get the sent messages with the email address, we are going to find whether we can get messages that the user sent with this email address, and we're going to call back that message. But if we don't have any message, we're going to call back a null value. But if we have received messages with the same email address, we also have to emit back that messages and call back that user, and call back that messages, so that we don't have to get other user messages. I think that's the best way we can get our own private messages. Quickly, let's go over to the chat actions. Now inside these chat actions, we are able to get those messages. What you can do next is to construct our own messages, because we're going to have something called sender. So the sender does not exist in the returned messages. So I'm just going to return an object. So this object is going to be a data, the data we got from the emitted messages, and then we have to specify my email is equals to the data sender email. So if this is equals to the same value, we are using just the value, not the type. If this is equal to the same value, I am the sender, that is the current user is the sender. But if it is not the same value, then the sender, the other user is going to get the message as the receiver, which means that this is going to be false. Then right now you can just dispatch a type of load messages with a payload of my messages. I'm just going to quickly grab this and paste it on received messages as well. So the same thing that we did for the send messages, that's the same thing that we are doing for this one. And come over to the reducer, and we're gonna create a case for load messages. First of all, let's spread our states. Inside this reducer, like we spreaded this state, the next thing we have to do is to target the messages in our state. So make sure you do add messages array. The first thing we have to do is to grab any existing messages, and then we can spread our payload because both of them are going to be returned as an array of messages. Then we are done loading our messages, but right now we don't have any active message. Let's go ahead and start sending message. So coming back to this method called onSend, whenever we send to a user, we're going to be sending some message. So we added the send message that we got from our chat actions. So come over to the chat actions, you're going to see send message. Make use of that means that we have to come over to the messages component, the message component itself. Then inside this onSend, all I just have to do is to refer to that chat action. I mean send message action from chat action. And I'm going to send a message with the text message and also the receiver that is going to be receiving the message. So the receiver is going to be coming from this email. Then whenever this is done, we want to clear the message from our text input. So I can just say this does set state. We have the text message and we can set it to an empty parameter. And let's go over to this chat action. You can just say hi, and when I send, I think this should automatically clear that because our default parameter here is using the states. Okay, when I send that hi, and if that goes through, it should automatically clear. Or let me hit enter. So nothing is clearing, but okay, let's move ahead. We are still going to come back to fix any issue. Let's move ahead. We are still going to, let's just refresh the application while we work on the chat action. So whenever we are sending a message, we are going to be getting these two values. And we can pass that two values over there. And let's go ahead and console.log the text message. I'm going to click on user 1 and open my console and open the Android app. I'm going to type hi and hit enter. And we don't get anything yet. This.props.send message. We have, where is the send message from here? We have the send message over here, and definitely we should get send message over here. So I can just console.log the text message. So guys, in case you still encountered some errors, just go ahead and restart the application, because I don't think we didn't initially have an error, but right now everything can work perfectly. And when we check in our console, we get the text message that we are dispatching from our component. So everything is working fine. And coming back to this action, I'm going to compose a message that we're going to be storing in our database. And it's going to have an ID of UUID version 4. Then we can give it a room ID, which is the active room ID that we got from our get state. So I'm just going to quickly grab some things from get state. And we are going to get the chat. So this is getState.chat. So over here we have the active room, and also we have the active user. So the room ID is the active room, and also the text message is the text message that we are going to be getting from our send message function. Then we have the receiver email. So we can say the receiver email is going to be the receiver that we get from the function, and also the sender email is going to be the active user. And for the time, we are going to create our own time when the user send a message. So I'm going to create something called new date. So over here I'm going to say date.getHours, and also date.getMinutes. I think date dot something is not right. We have date dot get, oh sorry guys, this is date, not data. Date.getMinutes, and we can just give it a sender of true. So let's just give it a sender of true, and let's kind of console.log compose message and save, and check in our console. I'm going to say a message of hi and send, and you can see we have the ID of the message, the receiver email, which is the chat user 1, the sender email, but the room ID is not actually showing. So let's kind of figure out why the active room is not actually showing. So let's kind of check. So guys, the problem was because I think maybe I forgot to add this, but let's kind of add a case of active room. This is going to return from the state. We have the active room to be the payload that is going to be dispatched whenever we join two users, and we can just add an active room over here. So I'm just going to set that to null and go ahead and save, and it's going to refresh our application. Over here is where the active room are being dispatched with the room ID. So whenever we send, we expect to get that active room from our send message. So I can say hi once again and text, and this time around I should get a room ID. So we have a room ID, and that error goes away. And checking with our message again, I can just dispatch, and we get the message DD. You could see the room ID that we are using over here. So everything is working fine. So what we have to do now is to populate this message in something called active room messages. I'm going to add to our initial state something called active room messages. It's just going to be an empty array. So I'm going to populate this message, that active room messages, because I want to list out every messages that we have in our active room message. Compose message. Let's go ahead and save that and come over to the chat reducer. So we have active room messages. So I think we are dispatching add message, and that's going to be very simple. After the load message, we're gonna bring the case of add a message, and we're going to return from the state. We want to we're going to store this message we are just adding here to the active messages and also to the array of messages. So both these and this, active room messages are going to be the same. So let me make sure that the spelling are the same. Active room messages and the messages. So we are going to be having the state.messages, and we're going to spread the put the payload, which is the object. Same thing, state.active room messages, and then we also pass the payload. And let's put a comma there and save. And once we are done with that, we are now able to, we will now be able to use the scroll view to actually get our messages. Right here inside this message component, the first thing we have to do here is to bring in a box, and this box is going to be having a flex of 1 to use the remaining width and height, and it's going to have a padding top or small. Then inside this box, look at what we are going to do first. We are going to console.log these.props .chat.active room messages. So let's kind of click on this message and open our console. So right now you see we have undefined, but you can see that this our chat has now scrolled down, and the scroll view has taken the total remaining width and height. I can just say hi and send, and when I send, I think something should get updated from our. So right now nothing is being updated, but let's kind of go ahead and check what the problem is. So right here we are dispatching to add the message, so I'm just going to console.log the payload to make sure that everything is working perfectly. So we get that message which is actually being dispatched, but we shouldn't get an error. We shouldn't get an undefined because we spread the messages from before we pass the payload. Then we have active room messages over here. So let's go back to that. We have the chat.active room messages. So we have this .props.chats. So hopefully that should work this time around. So let's say hi once more and send. Okay, right now you could see we have this .props.chat. We could get the messages, and when we say hello again, you see the last message is hello, and everything is now showing. So we have some couple of 2 messages in our component. So the way we can now use this, we are going to be making use of the scroll view, just like I said. I can now say that this .props.chat.active room messages .length is greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, we are going to return something like a box. So let me just properly do it. For this one, I'm just going to put null for now. So inside each box, justify everything to the center. Align the items as well to the center. And lastly, we have to give it a flex of 1 to take the remaining width and height. Then we can say a text of start chatting. So let's save that. So if we don't have any message in our active room messages, we are gonna get something like start chatting. So this .props.chat.active room message, active room messages .length is greater than 0. So I don't know where this error is coming from, but let's kind of remove this and check. So we shouldn't be getting that error. So okay, let's allow this to finish the refresh first. So it was needful for me to refresh the application, and this time around let's go ahead and try that again. This .props.chat.active room messages.length is greater than 0. Maybe I misspelled something, I guess. Then if it is not greater than 0, then we display something like start chatting. So let's save that again and give it a try. But this time around we are getting an error. So let's check. Undefined is not an object. This dot prop dot children. It's not an object. So why don't we say this dot props dot chats dot active room messages. Then we check if that do exists first before we proceed. And let's kind of click on the user again. Still get the same error, but it was working fine. Okay guys, if it's not going to work, let's just try this way. We could say this dot props dot chats, and we can try active room messages. So let's kind of console.log active room messages and see. We get undefined. For what reason? I think I just have to copy this and I'm going to paste this there to see the difference. So we are making a mistake. Okay guys, so I'm sorry for this, and that's because over here in the chat reducer we are using MGS, not messages. So I'm just going to properly change it over here, and let's save that, come back to our message, and I'm going to save it again this time around on comment and save, and we get start chatting. So everything is working fine and perfectly now, so we don't need to trouble ourselves again. So if I say something like hi and send, this start chatting automatically should get away. Okay, it didn't get away, but let's go ahead and use the scroll view. So the scroll view will be better because the scroll view can render itself whenever it notices a change on the component. So I'm just going to quickly open that. So what I can do here is to bring the scroll view, and remember that we're using a ref. So this ref here is an object, and it's going to have a ref this dot scroll view, and we set that this dot scroll view to that ref. So why we did this is because we wanted that whenever there's a change in the values or in the array, automatically it's going to scroll to the bottom. So we don't want to waste time whenever it's scrolling to the bottom, either when the user sends a message to us or when the user receives a message from us. So we can say sorry guys for that. So inside here we can say on content size change, which is going to be an object or a callback of this dot scroll view dot scroll to end, and we can say animated to true. And the next one, we can just add the show vertical scroll indicator and set that to false. Then for the on layout, which is going to be handling every change for us, for the scrolling of the bottom and also scrolling to the top, we also have to add an animated of true to it. Then inside this scroll view, sorry guys for that, this is some professional that I'm doing. So you can say this dot props dot chats dot active room messages dot map. So we're gonna have a return of JSS, and inside here we're gonna use the structuring to bring in the text message and the sender, and we have the index So inside here, we're going to be returning. We don't have. Do we have to return anything? Nope. We can wrap everything on the fragments and render the item. I'm going to create a component called render item quickly. I'm going to spread everything called the text message and also the sender. So I think we already have the render item at the bottom. Okay, we already have it, and let's go ahead and save. So can I say hi? Or let's reopen our application. So let me add another message like hello. So it's not working. Let's check our reducer. And we're using messages here, and the problem is from here as well. So let's save. This time around is going to work. And on the next part, we are going to be using the sockets to display the message to the other user. Let's go ahead and try that again to see whether we are going to return that message to ourselves. I can say hi. And right here, you could see that message, and we are having an issue because of the keys. So for the key, we are going to have a key to the fragments. So for the render item, we just have the text message and the sender. And this is just a little thing we added to it. So there is nothing much, and this is just the previous style we have for the input, the footer, and the chat header. So just go ahead and push it down. So for the sender, we just confirm whether we are the one sending the message. So if we are the one sending the message, it's going to align everything to the right. But if it is the other user over here, it's going to align everything to the flex start. Likewise, also the background color, we are using the restyle. If it is us that is sending, is going to be taking the primary, or else it's going to be white. So what I wanted to do was, let's say hello again. So okay, we wanted to add a unique ID, and we can say a key of index. And let's save that, and that error goes away, and we can send how are you, and you can see we get that message. So right now it's only this user can get this message. The other user can't get the message because we are not yet using socket to emit to the second user. So that's what we're gonna do on the next video. So thank you for watching, guys. Make sure you hit the like button and also the subscribe button, and see you on the next part. Guys, welcome back to this WhatsApp clone application or Messenger clone application that we are working on. So before you continue, make sure you hit the like button and also the subscribe button. So in this part, we are going to complete the application. We have already done the most essential thing. At least whenever a user texts a message, the user can be able to see the message he or she text. So when I hit on this, you could see the message I text over there comes to me. So the way we can now show this message to the second user is very simple. We are going to emit an event with the socket. So I'm going to emit something called send to user, an event called send to user. So let's make it a small letter. And inside here is going to be the message that we want to emit to that user. So first of all, we have to emit to the room ID, which is the active room, the sender email, which is the active user, and also the receiver email, which is the receiver, and then the message that we want to send, which is the compose message. And let's go ahead and save that and go over to our socket. So in this socket file, after we join the user, beneath that we are going to catch for send to user. So with this, we get the data that the user is sending, and we want to emit to the second user using socket.broadcast to data room ID. Sorry guys for that noise. And then we emit a function called dispatch message. Then we spread the data, and we also have to make some constructs with the room ID, the sender email, the receiver email, because we want to store this message in our database. We also have to get the compose message. We get the time and also the text message. And we get all these things from the data. Then lastly, we have to use our schema. Then we have the room ID. We pass the sender email that we grabbed. We get the receiver email as well. The time, the text message, and lastly we save that message so that each user can also have the message whenever the application automatically opens. So let's go ahead and refresh our application and actually send a message. So when we send a message and even close our application and return, we should at least get the message back because the message is stored in our database. So I'm going to send hi. So we're having an issue, and the issue it's saying the can't find variable sender email. Is it from our back end? Nope. And that's because here we have the sender email. Let's kind of check. The sender email is the active user. Yeah. So I think I even placed it separately. And let's try that again. I can send hello. And when I send hello and go over to my MongoDB Compass and refresh, I should see like 2 messages. So we don't yet get a message. I think we just saved the message, so we should probably get a message. So let's save that and refresh once more. And let's send. So we sent a message. So right now you could see we are able to send a message, and I'm going to send a message from my phone application. So I'm going to send hi from that one, and let's refresh. So you could see the hi that I sent from my mobile device. So you could see right now we are able to get message, but one thing remaining now is for us to catch the message from the socket using the room ID. And if you can observe here, we are emitting to that room ID that we joined from the top here. So if you didn't join with this room ID, you can't be able to use it to catch the messages. So right now, let's go ahead and catch each separate messages. And let's quickly get our message. So I'm just going to go over to the chat actions. So we are going to be handling the dispatch message from this place. So, but for us to make use of this function, we are going to be making use of this function from our app file. So already we are making use of it, so we don't need to worry. And I'm just going to say socket.on dispatch message. I'm going to grab the data. So let me just kind of console.log the data from my mobile. So I'm sending this from my mobile phone, but because this user is actually connected to that room ID, I will get a single emitter that is going to notify me that a user just sent a message. So I'm just going to text just something random. So I think I need to refresh the application so that it's going to update on my phone. And let's go ahead and give that a try once more. I'm going to join to Samuel. I'm going to join to user 1. And I can say anything. And over here, you see, the message that I'm sending is only one that is being gotten. But you could see we are getting this from my mobile that is actually on my PC. So I can just say something like alert so that I can actually see how it's going. You can say okay and save that again, and I can say send something like hi and send. So it's actually not updating. Let's go ahead and refresh. So it's going to log us in. I'm going to click on this user. So guys, we're already approaching the end of this course, so it's just for us to handle the dispatches. So when I send a message, you see this user now gets the message. So right now, let's go ahead and finish up every other thing that we've started. So I'm going to dispatch the function called get dispatch message. And I'm going to pass the data, but I'm going to spread it. And I'm going to quickly create a function called get dispatch message, which is going to accept the ID of the message, the room ID, the sender email, the receiver email, and also the compose message, which is the compose message. We are going to map it to composed message so that we don't have a collision. So this is totally wrong, and we can format that to look pretty. Then inside there, I'm just going to construct a message again, spread the ID, spread the composed message. So this is a composed message. Then the sender this time around is going to be the active user is equal to the sender email. So the active user, we are going to quickly grab active user from getState.chat. So I can just think from the assign here, we can have the dispatch and also the get state. Then we have the room ID. And lastly, we can dispatch a type of inject message with the payload of the message that we just constructed. So we have the room ID, the receiver email. I think I forgot to add the sender email and also the receiver email. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that. So whenever I text a user, this is going to dispatch. I'm going to come over to the chat reducer and I'm going to catch the case of inject message. So it's going to return from the state. So, but for now, let me just kind of console.log the payload to make sure that we get a single message whenever we dispatch. So in the user one, I'm just going to open my console. I can say hi. and you can see the hi automatically shows up here. So right now we can actually now store this message, the injected message, in our store so that we can actually see it on our application. So I'm just going to grab this from the payload. What I want to just grab is the message ID. I want to check whether there is a duplicate. So I can say calls check if message ID exists. So I can say state dot messages dot filter. So I want to filter the ones that the ID. I can say here that the message ID is equals to the ID. So I can say if check message exists dot length is greater than 0. I just have to return the initial message, so that the ones that is already in the state, I don't want a duplicate. But if not, we just want to return. So I just have to clear this out. So if not, from the state, I want to make some couple of replacements. So I can say the messages state, I think we have an error here. This is going to return from the state messages. It's going to be state dot messages. Then we spread the payload which we got, and let's go ahead and save that. So let's go ahead and try to text this user to see whether it will actually display. You can say hi once more. So we are getting an error that is saying non-iterable. We are spreading something wrong. And that's because this is not supposed to be spread. Last thing is we have to add it to the active room messages. Sorry, I forgot to do that, which is the state.messages and also the payload. And let's save once more. Refresh our application because I want the one on my phone to refresh before I will send the message. So the one on my PC is kind of having some delays, so I'm going to reopen it. So we're almost done, guys. So I'm going to join the room over here, and I'm going to wait for the second user to join the room. I'm going to click on chat user 1 and also join the room. So I'm going to text hi from my mobile. So you see my message now appears. I can now reply hello, and automatically it's on my phone. I can say how are you? So I can say how are you? And when I text it instantaneously, you are gonna see it there. So let's go over to chat user 2 to see whether the message will appear. So the message is appearing here because we've not yet done some things, but hopefully we are gonna do it. So guys, I know it's been a long ride, so do not forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button. So guys, one of the things that we have to fix now is the ability for us to get all our messages and store it into our reducer. And also whenever we click on chat user 2, we don't want to see the messages sent to chat user 1 to show for chat user 2. So come over to your actions, and beneath this get all messages, I think get all users, we need to use this function called load messages. So over here, you have to dispatch load messages. So this load messages is going to load the messages that we sent. So look at it over here. We have already done this. The send messages and also the received messages. So I think in the console, we should get all the messages that we sent and all the messages that we received. So I'm going to save that, and then so inside here we don't still yet get the messages, because we need to now make sure that the messages in our reducer is our particular message for a particular user. So that will now lead us to use these last two functions at the bottom, the load messages and also clear active messages. So this clear active messages is going to be clearing every message in active room messages whenever we click on a user to chat with that user. So to take for example, when I click on this user, it's going to clear that, and then it's going to run load messages. So inside this function, I'll just quickly start by, inside here we need to dispatch a type of clear active messages. And let's go over to the reducer. So all we just have to simply do here is to bring the case of clear active messages, and we just have to return from the state. We refer to the active room messages and we just set it to an empty array, and then come over to the users, I guess. So go over to the users component. So inside this user component over here, okay, we already dispatched clear active messages. So whenever we click on a user, so let's say for example I typed hi, and this is going to be on my active messages. So whenever I go back and click on this user, I think we shouldn't get anything here. So also whenever I click on user 1, we shouldn't get any message, because this is going to clear that messages. Then lastly, we commented out a function that we left here. So this function is going to be used to now load the active chat that we want to communicate with that user. Both the old messages sent to this user and also the old messages received from this user. So that's why we are using this load room messages from our React Router. So make sure you import that. So over here you see the load room messages, and then lastly you pass it over here. Then come over to these chat actions. So the first thing we have to do here is to get the state. So from the state, we are going to be getting the active room, active user, and also the messages. So I'm just going to quickly use the structuring. So we get from chats. So what we get is the active room, the messages, and also the active user. So this is just the user currently using this application. And then we use a promise with a resolve. Then we just have to resolve, and then inside this callback we just have to get active room messages, which is the messages that we got. So let's kind of console.log this. It should show us all the messages that we sent and also all the messages that we received from a user. So you could see all the messages sent and also all the messages received. And let's go ahead and do some constructs, because the ones that we sent is going to be at the right, the ones that we receive is going to be at the left. So what we have to do here is to filter. We have to filter using the room ID of that active room. Then we have to make sure that the room ID is equal to the active room. Then when we are done with this, we map everything to this data, and then we return a callback. So inside this callback, we are going to return everything from the data, except that we are going to replace the sender. So we say if the active user, because the active user is the current email address, is equals to the data.sender email, then it's going to be true, so that the ones that we send is going to be at the right, because in the messages over here, so let me just kind of check that out. In the render item here, we say that whenever the sender is true, you're going to use flex end, or else it's going to use flex start for the incoming messages. And lastly, you just have to dispatch a type of active room messages, and then we pass the payload of active room messages. So let's save that, and hopefully we should get some things for the active room messages. I think, okay, we already have it. So over here we are getting an array. So after the refresh, go ahead and click on chat user 1, and you can only see the messages that chat user 1 has. And when we come over to chat user 2, we are not going to get anything because we don't have any message with chat user 2. So I can say a message to chat user 2, and when I send this, it's going to send to chat user 2, and whenever chat user 2 logs in, chat user 2 is going to have access to that message. So this one for chat user 1, chat user 1 is going to have the message displayed to itself. So you can see that everything is now separated, and it doesn't just show together. So I can just say message to chat 1. So we are done with this tutorial. So guys, do not forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button.